Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today I'm with a singer-songwriter. He's a Canadian turned Angelino. I think that's what you call Los Angeles people. And he just released a new single today. We're recorded on April 5th. It's called Neither Love Nor Money. I think I got it right. Yeah?
Yeah.
There we go. It's my pleasure to have the one and only Michael Rault.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before this single, it's been like a couple years since you've released music, right?
Yeah, been more than a couple. I think my last record came out in May of 2018. So almost exactly, what is that, 4 years? Yeah, almost exactly 4 years. But
Jeez.
The pandemic and everything kind of pushed everything back a little bit further than it probably would have been otherwise.
Damn, that's crazy. So did you kind of take like a hiatus of music, or like were you still like writing and recording during? I guess we're still in the pandemic.
I was like almost completed this record when in March 2020 when the pandemic came down.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time it was kind of a halted process trying to figure out, just kind of stop and start for a while there, trying to get this record done. So for a while I was just working really hard on trying to figure out the logistics of getting it recorded and getting it made, given the new circumstances that arose.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the meantime, played a lot with my girlfriend's band, Pearl Charles, her band. I played on her records quite a bit and did quite a bit of studio work as things loosened up. I mean, for a while, it was pretty locked down here in California, but as it loosened up, I started to do some more studio work. I played some guitar on the upcoming record by a band called Drug Dealer, mm-hmm. and did a tour as things started to open up even further. I did a tour on guitar for a band called Paint. I did some touring with Pearl Charles's band. I did some touring with, just as very recently, got off this tour about a week ago with a band called Witch, which is a 1970s Zambian rock band that is reformed with some of the original members and sometimes myself as one of the guitar players. So no, I haven't really taken a break.
Right.
Just been kind of waiting for a while for the timing to be right to get this latest solo record out into the world.
Yeah, you came to Seattle in November, right? For a Freakout Fest.
Yes, I did. And I was on tour with Pearl's band, and then also we played with my band there too as well, actually.
Oh.
That was the one of two shows on the tour where the band switched and I was the front person, but it was still the same band that was backing up Pearl. The rest of the tour was all with Pearl stuff. But
Gotcha.
we did do Freakout Fest both with Pearl and with my band.
Wait, so are you one of those people that considers your name as a band as well? Like, some people I'm blanking.
Well, I mean, I don't really consider it like as a band, but it is. I mean, we don't go by the Michael Rault band, so it gets complicated when it's like. So it's same with Pearl stuff too. It's not the Pearl Charles band or the Michael Rault band. Although sometimes they say that on social media just to be clear that it's not a solo set.
Yeah.
I very rarely play solo sets. So usually, if you see Michael Rault listed on a show poster somewhere, that usually means that there's a band involved in some way, shape, or form.
So the band that you do work with when you do shows is it the same people from? Has it been
from Pearl's band? It's been kind of, so the band that I've been playing with, it sometimes rotates a little bit, but lately the band that I've been playing with has been the same rhythm section that backup Pearl, and then also additionally a guitar player by the name of Jake Miles, who's a talented musician from Austin. He also joins in, and sometimes Pearl's in the band. I think we're going to be doing some touring actually where we kind of co-headline, hopefully in the summer or fall. And that will be just exactly the same band, just basically set to set. It'll switch from being me to Pearl or vice versa, singing and leading the band. So that's kind of what the formation is right now. Yeah. But we'll see how things go along. That's a tricky thing about having a solo project is by its nature, there's times that sometimes people aren't available for certain things. And particularly with so many shared members between Pearl's band and my band at the moment, I may have to find some people who are not going to be booked by Pearl at some point in time when we potentially double booked. But we're just getting used to the whole touring life and kind of normal life that we used to live, 3 years ago or whatever, before everything changed. And now it's kind of back to normal, sort of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's that like dating someone who's also an artist and a touring artist at that?
Um, it's great. I mean, it's been really great in the sense. I mean, when we met, we were both working. She managed to release a record during the pandemic, so
Hmm.
she was working on her record Magic Mirror, and I was working on this record that just got announced today, and then we released the first single off of. And her record ended up coming out quite a lot quicker in the sense that it came out in, I don't know, the early. I can't remember what month it was, but relatively early on in the pandemic. My thing wasn't quite finished, and then we decided to kind of push the release back a little bit further even after we finished it. So, but anyways, nonetheless, long story short, when we first met, we were both working on these records, and we were both kind of, she sang on my record a little bit and helped with it and kind of gave me feedback, and I played on her on that record as well as the subsequent stuff she's done since then.
Hmm.
And that's been great. But at the time when we first met, we were kind of like, well, these records, we assume the records are probably going to come out within the next 6 months or something like that. When we first met, maybe a year, but we were assuming they would probably come out sometime in 2020, both of them, and we would both tour them in 2020. So we kind of were like bracing ourselves for being like, well, it's gonna be interesting to see what it's like when we actually are both on tour, like seriously. And we'll have to figure out how that is, because it's difficult to be away from each other for like as much as that can bring you apart. So but we haven't really done that yet. So ultimately, like, I haven't released a record since then, as the fates would have it, and she has only done only so much touring in this time, a little bit more than I have, but not a ton. And I've been on most of those tours, if not all of them. So we haven't really had to actually part ways yet, which I think is going to be the most challenging element of being professional musicians in a relationship. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can figure out a way to make it work, but it's not something that I look forward to entirely, but I think we can manage.
Wait, so you guys met before the pandemic, or like right before the pandemic?
We met in May of 2019, I think, and then I think I ended up coming down to LA, mostly full time down in LA, but I was kind of back and forth a little bit between my hometown of Edmonton, Alberta, and LA, and she was a little bit in and out. So I was only here like most of the time from August of 2019 forward, and then come March, I was like mostly here, but that was the moment that I had to decide basically what side of the border I was going to spend the pandemic on. We're closing everything down, and I had no idea how long that was going to last. So that was really the moment that I guess like basically full time became a American Californian resident. And we spent the beginning of that in LA, and then we eventually found our place right now, where we're actually in Landers, California, which is around Joshua Tree. So we're kind of splitting our time between Joshua Tree and LA at this point in time. But
nice.
Now I guess it's been 3 years or something since I've basically been down here. Yeah, it's getting around there.
Do you still like LA after being there during the pandemic? Wasn't there like fucking fires and lockdowns and all that shit?
Yeah, it was pretty nuts. It was, yeah, there was a couple of weeks there where it was like just tons of protests, which was great, but it was like scary that there was like a curfew and like tons of weird military presence in the city, and there was like the skies were like blacked out by fire, and we were all just in stay-at-home orders, both because they're trying to control the protests and also because they were trying to control the virus.
Yeah.
And that those times you were kind of like walking around being like, well, this just kind of seems like this is the end of the world, but I guess we'll just try to keep on keeping on through it. And I mean, I love LA. It's a great place to be. The fires and the earthquakes and stuff. There was also a couple of earthquakes at that time too. It really did feel like every
end of the
possible thing
world
was at the exact same time. But I do love LA. I am happy to have our place in the desert to get away to, because LA's can be quite hectic. It's just very tons of people all in the same place. And I mean, it's not like Joshua Tree actually is kind of getting more and more hectic as well, but our place is a relatively decently sized property without a bunch of neighbors, and the roads we live on aren't that busy. Right. So I kind of have a little bit more of a sanctuary here.
How far away is Joshua Tree from LA? Isn't it like an hour or two, right?
2.5 hours or so driving.
Oh shit.
It's a little less during the pandemic when it was like more when everything was shut down, but it's got back up to 2.5 hours now, basically, with normal traffic and everything.
How often do you commute to LA ever, or do you basically have everything you need in your house?
I have everything I need here. Pearl commutes more often than I do, but I do still commute quite a bit. I mean, there's obviously more shows, and some of our band members are in LA, and there's also a lot of if I get any outside work, like music work and stuff, it's probably going to be in LA. So I do the drive relatively often. I'm kind of just getting settled back out here again for the first time since the last tour that I was just on with Witch. So I'm hoping to stay here for a while without having to leave and kind of just get settled in out here. But we'll see. It's always all kind of up in the air with this lifestyle.
Yeah. Wait, how long were you on tour, and like how'd you get connected with Witch?
I was on tour with them for about 3 weeks, I think. I got connected with them through, I toured with Jaco Gardner, who is a psyche pop experimental guy from the Netherlands. I toured with him in 2015, 16 or something like that, in Europe, and a couple shows in the States. And we all got along really well. And ultimately we hadn't really talked in years. I knew that, so shortly after the time that I met all those guys and toured with them, they went to Africa, to Zambia, and one of their friends who I'd met on when I was touring with them, this guy Gio, and them and Nick, Yako's drummer, and Yako all traveled down to Zambia and made a documentary about like finding the lead singer of this classic Zambian rock band, this guy Jaggery. And they met up with him and they made the movie. And so I'd heard about this, and I knew that they'd done a few shows reforming the band with Yako and Nick in the band, and whoever. And like I knew that they'd been doing this, and basically at some point they needed a guitar player for North America. This was in 2019 as well. And so I ended up doing a tour with them, and it went really well. And then we were planning on being on tour quite a bit. And then out of nowhere, the pandemic happened. It's a reoccurring theme in all these stories. But this is the first time I've actually been able to get out with them and see all those guys again since, I guess it was probably like, I think the last show I did with them was February of 2020. So it was like right on the verge of everything shutting down again. And we had a bunch of stuff booked, but then everything obviously got canceled. And this is the first time I've gotten out with them again.
That's pretty dope. So
yeah, it was cool.
How many members are in that band?
So in that band, it's Jaggery, the lead singer, the original lead singer of Witch, is in the band. He's 70 years old.
Oh, wow. Touring at 70? That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It is pretty impressive. Then there's Patrick, who is also from Zambia, who's slightly younger. I think he's like 65 or something, who actually he lives in London, but he was actually the band leader of Witch when they went into their disco phase, which is getting reissued a lot now too. They're actually like the two band leaders of Witch, but they're together in this lineup. And then it's Jaco Gardner on bass. It's Nick on drums, who used to play drums for Jaco and plays with a bunch of cool bands, and myself on guitar. On this latest tour, it was myself and this guy JJ Whitefield, who is done a lot of really cool stuff, like the Poets of Rhythm and the Whitefield Brothers and stuff. Some really cool records out of Germany. He's a German guy. Sometimes when it's not him, it's Stefan, who plays, another guitar player, and myself, or sometimes it's those two and not me. We have a rotating cast of 3 guitar players to try to cover everything, because everybody's got a bunch of different projects they're doing. But Stefan has a project called Leclerc, which is also he's also busy with sometimes, which is why he couldn't do this tour and I did this one. But yeah, so it's a 5-piece with sometimes a rotating cast of people.
So when people reach out to you, is it usually to do guitar, or do you do vocals on other people's tracks?
Yeah, sometimes I just did a vocal thing, like a featured vocal thing on a record that hasn't been announced yet or hasn't come out yet. So I probably shouldn't say much about it, but sometimes that happens. It happened recently, and I guess that at some point in time you'll see a artist featuring me as a singer coming out. I get a decent amount of guitar stuff. I've done bass on people's records. I play drums sometimes on my own stuff sometimes, but I don't really get. I guess I've been doing that a little bit more on people's stuff recently, but that's probably my least strong thing. And I do keyboards on my own stuff too, but I don't usually get hired for keyboards or drums. Usually bass or guitar, and sometimes vocals, I guess, is the stuff that I do kind of as like a session guy for other people.
Yeah. Wait, so what genre would you say you're in? You're like psychedelic a little bit, but like you kind of fall under multiple realms, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like it's a little psychedelic. I mean, psych rock is kind of like, I kind of feel like psych rock is like the folk music of our generation, the way it was for the baby boomers. Like in the sense that like all of the baby boomers and like my dad's generation, all these people all like played folk festivals, and there's all these folk festivals that started all over the world. And whether or not you were a folk band or not, you oftentimes if you were in that world, in that age group, and that sort of demographic, you would end up touring and playing all these folk festivals. And it sort of seems like psych rock has kind of done that for our generation, in the sense that it's like there's so many psych festivals, and if you're playing guitar driven or just even like live instrument driven music, if you're not falling into like EDM or like, you know, hip hop world, like 100%, then you kind of end up getting drawn into the psych world, in the sense that, so it's like, even if you're not really psych rock, you're going to play a bunch of psych fests, and you're probably going to get classified as psych to some degree. But as far as my stuff goes, I feel like it's sort of psychedelic. It's not really like falling 100% into the psych rock world the way it sort of is most truly defined nowadays. But, you know, there are some psychedelic elements to it and psychedelic effects. I kind of feel like I'm doing like, I mean, it's like I'm kind of influenced by like yacht rock and soft rock to some degree with a lot of my new stuff, and like a little bit of like folk rock, I guess, too. But there, you know, and there's a little bit of psych sprinkled in there, but yeah. I'm not really sure exactly what you would call the genre, but it's sort of, it's kind of coming out of I feel like it's coming out of a relatively cohesive world where, you know, it seems like a lot of the genres I'm interested in exploring are also genres that like certain labels are reissuing things from that world and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's sort of fits into this sort of psych, soft rock, yacht rock kind of thing.
Yeah, I've like unintentionally had like my past two guests have been in the psychedelic realm.
Cool.
Yeah, I just had this guy named Gianti who lives in Australia, and he works with like Godier and people like that. And
he works with who, sorry?
What?
Who did you say he worked with?
Like Godier.
Oh, cool, awesome, nice.
Yeah, and then I don't know if you know them, but Communicant, they're from LA. The lead singer's name is Dylan Gardner, but it's kind of crazy. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm also not like, I'm not the most connected LA guy because I have spent so much of my time here without socializing. Pearl might have a better chance of knowing people from LA than I do, because she's actually born and raised there and spent a bunch of time there before they shut down the world. I'm starting to like get to socialize with people, you know, more now, and meeting people that I'm like, yeah, I've been living here for 3 years, but nobody knows.
What about like when you were living in Canada? Do you think you're like a pretty outgoing guy, or do bands kind of like stick to themselves, just like the members that are in the group, or do you guys? Because I don't know if there's as much collaboration as compared to like hip hop or pop or maybe even EDM, because EDM works with like pop and hip hop all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it is true. There's less. I mean, actually, I might be getting to be more collaborative now. I think like there's a scene like LA. One of the great things about LA is like there really is a scene there. It's one of the things that kind of drew me to living there, was like there are a lot of people in bands that I like who are around there's certain like clubs and certain places you'll go that you'll see all those people. Mm-hmm. Like it's only a handful of places that they're probably going to go out. I'm not the most outgoing person in the world. I mean, I think that like having a girlfriend and stuff also just makes it, and now living in the desert makes it so that I'm not like necessarily trying to go out to the club or like to the bar like all the time. Yeah. But you get out and about sometimes. And I mean, some of our band members are like living in LA and are more out and about. So I don't know if it has anything to do with playing in a band or the type of music that we play, whether or not you're going out all the time. It just has to do with, I guess, the space you are at in your life. Right now, I'm like very busy with music stuff, and I have my studio out here in the desert, and I'm living out here, so it gets harder and harder for me to like make it out and kind of get to socialize more often. But when I do, I enjoy it though, and LA is a good place to do it when you can.
Yeah, what do you do in the fucking desert? You're just making music, or like it seems like that's like, I live in the woods, and I feel like that's, I don't know, I feel like the woods is more calming than the desert. You don't have to worry about fucking like scorpions, and I don't know.
We did have some scorpions for a while, but they're not deadly. But we got the place. It's the place we haven't had scorpions for a while. It's chill. I mean, the desert is very calm. It's very like still when it isn't crazy windy, and it's very like it's just, I mean, it's really nice. It's beautiful. The scenery and the view from our porch and stuff is really nice. You have a lot of space. Yeah. It's very like you have a lot of room to make noise and to just kind of like do whatever you want to do with your life. So I mean, I mostly just do that stuff. There are really, I mean, the area that we're in around Joshua Tree is very like hip and cool. I mean, we're kind of a little bit outside of it, thankfully, because I don't really want to live in the middle of all of that, because it's just going to get harder and harder to afford and and make music and stuff. But the area, there are like some cool bars and places you can go, and um, both new and like classics. Like there's the classics like Pappy and Harriet's, which I'm actually playing opening for which in June.
Nice.
That's a really cool place that like Paul McCartney's played and stuff like that.
Oh
Like
shit.
it's a really, so I mean there's a lot to do even out here, although I don't always partake in it. Sometimes I just kind of hold up in my house and in my studio and working and stuff.
So are there still like there's like neighborhoods in the desert? Like are you in a neighborhood or are you literally just like in a house and
There
there's
are
this
neighborhoods. We're kind of more, Landers is a little bit less neighborhoody than some places. It's a little bit more like how there are houses around. We do have neighbors, but they're just kind of like spaced out. There's parts of the desert out here that are like actually feel like you're in like a suburban neighborhood with like houses just like right beside each other on blocks. But this is more like a block is like, you know, two houses that have a big, huge
Mhm.
property or whatever. It's more kind of like farm spacing, although there isn't actually farms here, but you know, it feels more like you're in a farmland area.
Yeah. Who convinced two to move to the desert, or did you guys both want to move that out there?
It was both of us. Pearl's family has a place out here that we would visit when it was unoccupied.
Hmm.
And that was kind of like a major escape for us from like the height of COVID in LA. And so we'd basically end up going to out here to kind of get away. And when we found this place, kind of the place we live now, kind of fell into our laps like very unplanned. And when we found it, I think we were kind of just basically like, we should probably do this. And luckily the landlord was into having us live here. So
Hmm.
it kind of was just like, it kind of wasn't really either of us convincing each other. It was more kind of like, it just kind of happened in a way that was very clear that it was the best move at the moment.
Yeah.
And it still remains the best move. I don't know. I mean, I would, in some ways, I'd love to live in LA full time, but at the same time, there's no way we could have the same resources and sort of living quality that we have here on anywhere close to the same budget. If we were
Yeah.
going to try to move to LA and live the same lifestyle we have right now, it would be like we'd have to just be extremely rich and buying a crazy place in Malibu or something like that.
Hmm. So are you an independent artist, or are you part of any record labels?
I'm signed to Wick Records, which is a subsidiary of Daptone Records,
Hmm.
for the last record and the new and the one that's upcoming. After that, I guess we'll see. That's my last record that I have signed with them for the moment. So, you know, I mean, I am an independent artist, but I have been lucky enough to be signed for the last handful of records that I put out. Actually, I mean, I haven't really put out anything fully independently since I was very young,
Hmm.
but we'll see what happens in the future.
And how'd you get connected with that record label?
With Daptone and Wick, I went down to record. So the last record, It's a New Day Tonight, I started recording with them, but they hadn't signed me. I just like got them to agree to record me, and I paid them for the time.
Hmm.
And after I'd done a couple weeks of recording there, the plan was to take it and record somewhere else. But Daptone ended up liking it a lot, and they ended up asking if I was interested in signing with them. So they signed me to their subsidiary Wick, which is like their rock and roll arm of their record label, because Daptone's kind of mostly known for soul and funk. And so they just kind of offered to sign me, and we worked out a deal, and so that was kind of how that happened. And now we've almost entirely gone through our whole agreed upon period, and it's been great working with them though for the time that we've worked together. So really happy that we were able to do that.
So when you're a Canadian, as an artist in Canada, um, is it kind of a given that you're going to move to LA, or is there enough resources in Canada to become a thriving artist? Because even if you look at like Drake or The Weeknd or any of those guys, they think they have houses in LA.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think that depends on how you want to do it. There is sort of I kind of, at least the way I felt growing up. I mean, growing up, I kind of felt like there was like a path that would possibly allow you to like stay in Canada and just be popular in Canada and maybe make sort of a decent living there. I kind of felt like the difference between the States and Canada in my mind was that there wasn't really the possibility of being an underground artist in Canada in the same way,
Hmm.
just because the population is so much smaller. Like California has a bigger population than Canada.
That's crazy.
So yeah, so it's like you can't in order to like maximize your potential in Canada, and in order to like be, and the drives are just, it's like, I mean, North America compared to Europe in general is so much more spaced out and so much like less densely populated. But like in America, it's better than it is in Canada. In Canada, if you're driving across like the Trans-Canada Highway, you're gonna like drive for a very long time with like nothing around, and you're gonna a lot of the towns that you're gonna end up playing if you're just touring on that route are going to be very small. So in order to have that be worthwhile whatsoever for you, you need to like basically, I think, be doing something that sort of fits some sort of mainstream Canadian market. And that
Right.
pretty much means you have to either get some major like CBC backing or some like major sort of like mainstream rock radio backing. If you're doing, I mean, those are the two avenues that would have been somewhat potentially possibly open to me. But I never really felt like musically, artistically, I would have felt like unnatural trying to fit into either of those templates. So for me, I kind of was seeing certain bands that were like doing underground rock and roll and garage and psych or whatever down here, especially at the time. For me, I felt like I fit more into that, although I still don't really feel like I fit into any particular template 100%. But I was looking at these bands and like, they were able to be not really accessing the mainstream and able to like still seemingly do really well and make a big name for themselves. Because I mean, for some bands that are coming out of California, as I said, the population's bigger than Canada, so they could just like tour. Even if they were just touring like regionally to begin with, they'd be touring the same amount of population that I'd be touring in a
wild.
like like a much smaller amount of driving, much smaller amount of like hardship to get to those places. And then they have the potential to grow out of state and grow and basically if they're accessing just even a small percentage of the American population with their sort of niche music, it's just way better than accessing that same population percentage in Canada, because that will just not allow, like, you're going to have to get a job. You will not be able to do this for a living. You'll have to have a day job. Which, and not that I've avoided having day jobs 100% anyways, but there was certainly no question of that I was going to have to figure out something else other than just play music if I stayed in Canada doing it the way I wanted to do it. So That was kind of my take on that.
Am I wrong here? But isn't there like a part of Canada that's like uninhabitable?
Probably. I mean, where I come from, it's very cold. Many people would find it uninhabitable. Edmonton, Alberta is like one of the most northern cities of its size, and it's in the world. And it's over 1 million people in the greater metropolitan area or whatever, but it like gets colder than the surface of Mars sometimes in the winter. It gets down to negative 50 degrees Celsius. It's extremely cold. And I mean, you go up further north than that, it's even colder, or at least cold more often. Mm-hmm. And there's parts of like the forest and the tundra or whatever that are like extremely densely forested and like very hard to survive in, even for like survivalists or whatever. So there's parts of Canada that are very uninhabitable.
Can you go skiing there? Do you ski at least when it's
I've skied a little bit as a kid. I have like my grandpa was like a championship skier, so it's very much in my family, but I've never gotten seriously into it. I do it very casually, but you can ski. Edmonton's only like a couple hours drive east out of the Rocky Mountains, so there you can get over into some really nice mountainous ski slopes relatively easily.
Wait, how does that work for if you living in the United States, doesn't that mean you have to like go back to Canada every couple months or years to what is it called?
Not for me, because I got a visa that is like allows me to be a resident here that lasts 3 or 4 years. I can never remember, but I got a little bit of time left on my last one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's expensive and annoying to have to always pay for visas, but it allows me to stay down here and work and live. So you do what you got to do.
That's crazy. You have to pay. So on top of actually like if you have a car and fucking house or whatever, you have to pay to actually live in another country. That's wild.
Yeah. Luckily, only every few years on the kind of visa that I'm on, but it is expensive. Yeah. It does add up. If I ever think about the amount of money I've spent on visas over the last decade or whatever, it's like not the most pleasant thing to think about, but somehow it always comes together, and I always find the money somehow. So far so good.
I wonder if there's any record label, like if there's like an artist that a record label really wants, if they'll cover an artist's visa.
They do sometimes, yeah. I mean, sometimes they sometimes pay for it. I mean, it's probably just out of your, most of the time it's probably just out of your advance or whatever. Like they gave you an advance and you're like, okay, part of this is just going to go towards paying for me being able to come down and play shows and stuff, because it's going to be pointless
Yeah.
for you to put out this record if I can't support it in the States. So it kind of works out that way usually.
Yeah. Well, so living in the desert though, you don't look that tan. Do you tan well, or what's the deal with that?
Well, it's just barely getting hot now. I mean,
Ah.
I've been gone here from a month, and it was basically still winter when I left. Which winter in the desert is cold, but I mean, not like cold like where I'm from, but coldish. But it's hot now, so I think I've got a little bit of sun just the last couple of days. But it was kind of crazy to come back and be like, whoa, it's a totally different climate than it was when we left. There's a lot of wildflowers now. I mean, not a lot, but a lot for the desert.
But no matter what, it gets cold in the nighttime, right? In the desert, or is it?
In the best times of year, right now, the nighttime is like nice, and the daytime is nice. As it gets into the actual like height of summer, it'll be like unbearable in the daytime, but then the nighttime will be like warm in a nice way. But in the winter, it always cools off in the nighttime, but in the winter it's like actually cold and then really cold at night, and then in the height of summer it's just like really nice and like, warm in the nighttime, but really extremely hot in the daytime.
Awesome. Are there any like crazy animals and insects out there, or besides scorpions?
There's like road runners, which are really cool.
Shit.
I really love the road runners. There's scorpions, which I've had to capture and release a few. There's rattlesnakes, but I've never seen any around our house. I've seen some on the roads and stuff occasionally. There's coyotes. Coyotes are all over the place. But there's a lot of coyotes in LA too anyway.
Yeah.
So but there's what else is there? Those are the most exciting ones that I've encountered so far, but it's pretty cool. There's a lot of crazy wildlife out here.
Are they are scorpions? I don't know if I've really seen many scorpions. Are they creepier than spiders, do you think, or are they like less creepy?
Well, they freak you out. I mean, there's also black widow spiders out here too.
Yummy.
But scorpions are pretty crazy. Seeing them is weird. I found I think maybe like one of their shells when we first moved into this house.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell. I was like, is this like a toy or something? But then I realized I was like, no, it's actually a scorpion. And then it was actually another year or so before I actually saw some living ones around here. And then we had a non-toxic exterminator come over and do some like non-toxic spraying, so we wouldn't mess up the ecosystem. But since then we haven't had any inside the house, which has been great.
But they're not. Are they big though, or like how are they?
They're like this, like maybe like this big, like from like head to tail, like the size in between my finger and my thumb. Not huge. I don't think they're the biggest ones ever, but they're kind of not maybe the smallest ones, but they're not the most poisonous ones. And I didn't know that when I was dealing with them at first. But I talked to some people later and I was like, man, I had to like capture this scorpion. And they're like, oh yeah, well, the good news is like, unless you're allergic, which I don't know actually if I am or not, but it was unless you're allergic, it won't kill you. It just hurt. It like is like a bee sting or something.
What about
but I think there are breeds that are much more painful and damaging to humans when they bite them, but not the ones that live in this part of the world.
They don't have as many legs as spiders, do they? I think they have less.
Yeah, I think they maybe have 4 legs and then a tail, maybe. I don't really remember. I wasn't really counting when I was dealing with them. But yeah, they have like their little like face, and then they have, I think, 4 legs. And then
don't they have like pinchers too? Don't they have like fangs and stingers?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. I think they have pinchers on their front legs, and then they have the stinger tail.
We should make like a documentary show about.
They're pretty nuts. They're really interesting.
I think they're creepier because they look like they have like spiders with armor, but they have less legs. I think the leg thing is what creeps me out for whatever reason, having that many legs. I don't know. Like I feel like if I saw someone with 6 fingers, that'd creep me out. Maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's they're pretty freaky. They're kind of a little scary, but you get used to this stuff being out here. I mean, before we even moved out here, when I was just visiting, I encountered my first black widow. And that was definitely, coming from Canada, I was just definitely very like, it's not, I mean, I found out again later that you wouldn't die if you got bit by a black widow, but it would like burn a hole in your flesh and create this like weird, this weird sore that you'd have to get treated. And you could die again if you're allergic or whatever, but it's like probably not going to kill you. The rattlesnakes would kill you if they bit you, which I've luckily never had any I've never actually had to, deal with any rattlesnakes hands on. I've seen them, but always like in a car or something when I see them, and I just leave them be, and there's no problems.
Very nice. Well, let's talk about this record. I think it's pretty it's pretty funky, right? I'd say it's a pretty funky record for you.
The newest one.
Yeah, new.
It's got some funky moments in it. It's got some kind of runs the gamut. Once you hear the whole thing, it's got stuff from kind of ranges from the first song we put out, Neither Love Nor Money, is kind of like in a slightly funky disco-y place, but kind of for me coming more out of like Paul McCartney like stuff that has that sort of vibe, or maybe like Ned Doheny or something. Kind of, I guess, kind of coming out of like more of a yacht rock kind of place, which really is like Blue-Eyed Soul from the 70s. Really, I've realized as I've listened to it more. So it's kind of like it's got some elements of funk and some influence from funk and disco and stuff, but it's kind of coming from a particular place with that stuff rather than being 100% down the middle funk or disco. Then there's songs that range into slightly folkier territory, like acoustic guitar driven with like harmonies and stuff, which in a way is kind of more similar to the last record. Some stuff that's a little bit more like the last record in the sense of being kind of like pop rock driven stuff. It kind of runs the gamut. It's got a bunch of different flavors and looks for the listener, whoever dares to listen to it.
So were you saying that disco is making a comeback?
I didn't say that, but it might be.
I thought you were saying that about this young.
I might have said that at some time. The disco. I mean, Pearl's done a lot of disco stuff with her, a little bit of leaning into sort of. I mean, on her first album that she put out since we've been together, she had a song called "Only for Tonight" that's like kind of an ABBA homage, and we actually put out a song that we co-wrote together. She put it. I mean, I'm not the artist involved in this, but I co-wrote it with her. This song called "Giving It Up" that's kind of leaning into sort of a Bee Gees-ish sort of territory. And now I got Neither Love Nor Money, which I guess is kind of leaning into sort of like a McCartney 2 sort of take on disco vibe. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It seems like some people are referencing it. I mean, I think everything. At this point in time, in the way that the internet works and the way that modern media and culture works, I feel like everything is having a comeback and also is out of style.
Yeah.
At the exact same time, depending on who you're talking to. Like you could be into a band, you could be into a scene, into a certain type of band or whatever that was putting out a certain type of thing 5 years ago. And so you could be hearing some other band doing it now, like 6 years after you got into it, being like, wow, they're really like behind the times. That stuff isn't cool anymore. Someone else could be listening to it simultaneously being like, whoa, I guess that's like what's going on now. So, I mean, I really don't know what's having a comeback or what's like, what's contemporarily applicable. I just feel like things are just kind of all happening at the exact same time.
What I did call though, I called that pop punk was going to make a comeback, and it did. I made a whole.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, it's
in a mainstream sense. Pop punk is definitely the thing that's having a comeback. It seems to have infiltrated the mainstream pop charts in a way that is undeniable.
Yeah, fuck, it might have been a year ago now, or maybe over the summer. I forget. But I have a second podcast. It's a conspiracy podcast. It's mostly focused on conspiracies, but like one of my last episodes, well, I guess almost a year ago now, it was about the return of pop punk. And I had a theory that on Kanye's new album, there was going to be some pop punk elements because like I feel like whenever Kanye drops a project, it incorporates what's currently cool and what's going to be cool.
Right,
and
yeah.
With Donda, I was like, there's going to be some pop punk elements, I bet you. And then the first song, Jail, it kind of has like a pop punk element to it. And it just won a Grammy. So like I nailed it around the head, and he won a Grammy for it. So that's kind of
pop punk is back. It's undeniable at this point in time.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
We'll see how long that lasts. It's hard to say, but it is interesting that it is so incredibly, undeniably. So yeah, that's definitely happening. Yeah. If disco ever ends up getting to that place again in the mainstream, then I can agree it's having a comeback. At this point in time, it's definitely. I see a lot of bands that are doing, beyond me and Pearl. I see a lot of bands that are referencing it and bringing it in, but it's also one of those things. I think even more so than pop punk, it's like disco is like always around and always, because it's just like I don't think anybody dislikes danceable, groovy, like the things that define disco in my mind are like great production and great grooves and great like musicianship with like really strong rhythmic elements. So it's like that's never really out of style. People like that stuff, even if they pretend they don't like it. They probably like it. They probably listen to it when even if they're like into way cooler stuff, they probably listen to it in private when no one's watching. So I feel like it's like disco is never really fully out of style.
Yeah. So I think it's safe to say your 2018 project was pretty successful. And
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that, I love so because my audience is a mix of music fans, but also musicians themselves, and I'd
Hmm.
love to hear whether it's some pointers or steps that you know happened for that project to be successful, so other artists can kind of brainstorm on how to either market their projects or basically how to market their projects and maybe some of the steps you took.
You know, that's an interesting question. I'll give you my best advice I can.
Mhm.
I think in this day and age, everybody is mostly just figuring it out as they go along. So, I mean, I guess the best advice I can give is like, just try to figure out a way to make the best records you can make, like whatever path is available to you at any moment, and make them and put everything you can into making them. Once you've found the best, the best collaborators or studio or space or whatever to do whatever you're doing to the best of your abilities, and put it out. And just like, I think ultimately it's good to get into a state of like flow these days. I think that maybe the times that I've been the most unproductive in my life have been when I've been really caught up trying to make like the perfect thing
Mm.
at any given time. Because I think that generally it's really more about figuring out how, like, what the best way to do what you want to do right in that moment is, and do it and put it out. And ultimately, everything lives on the internet forever now. And so all the things that I've put out are like generally sitting on the internet still, and they're all gaining new fans. It's kind of interesting to be putting out a new record now. That 2018 record, I think, has grown a lot of has like a lot the fan base for that record has grown a lot in the last few years. And I only toured it really solidly throughout 2018, and
Wow.
I've only done sporadic shows since then. So I haven't been like really out there like promoting it, or which I don't necessarily advise, as it's probably better to be out there promoting it more. But I wasn't really, so I kind of I was out of touch with the growth of it. But I kind of like continually throughout the last couple of years, without leading up to this new release, had more and more people reaching out to me who found the record and like it. Sometimes like relatively prominent musicians here hitting me up, or actors, or or just, and also just like, people who are just cool people are hitting me up and being like, oh, I love that record.
Mhm.
And it's brand new to them. And ultimately I'm starting to realize that it's just good to just make, and I think that's the lesson in that record for me, is that like I made that record the best I could at the time, and I put it out, and it did as well as it did. But ultimately, it is now still continuing to connect with people and stuff. So I mean, I think like without getting too slapdash about it and sacrificing the quality of what you're making, like still try to see everything through to be as good as it can, rather than just getting caught up in putting out a large volume of stuff. But at the same time, once you've done as good as you can with something, just put it out. And I think that in my experience as a relatively underground independent artist, the way to make a fan base is to like have everything you've worked on out available, and do a lot of stuff so that people can like slowly start to find you through all these different avenues of these different projects that you've worked on. Because it might be different, I guess, if you got signed to like a major label or a really big major indie, and kind of just got blown up out of nowhere off of one thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that requires a different approach. But if you don't have that avenue available to you, then it's really about just making as much of, and as high as quality stuff as you can. And I think that just like will start to find more people in the way that the algorithms and the internet works over time.
Yeah. That's an interesting take, because I know there's some artists, even some of my friends that make music, they, after a few years, they like to delete their old music and be like, oh, that was the past me. Now I'm 2022 me, and I want to release this project, and this is the only thing I want people to have seen by me.
I mean, I get that, and I guess that is a way to do things. I've been tempted to do that at times, but the tricky thing for me is like I've been doing this for a long time now. I'm getting to be relatively veteran, and I mean, it's like there are things. I mean, it's a tricky path to negotiate. It's like at what point you stop to go back in your history, what point you stop acknowledging this is like official releases or whatever.
Yeah.
I've put out enough records now on like legitimate labels that it's not even up to me to delete them anymore. You know, I
Right.
mean, I guess at some point in time, if the licenses revert back to me, I could at that point in time make them unavailable. But for right now, they're all still licensed to labels that are the ones who are marketing it and have all the uploads under their accounts and everything. So it's like at a certain point you stop being able to control it. And as you get older and you do this stuff more, I feel like you start to realize like really where are you going to draw the line. I almost can't relate to any record I made like 2 years after I made it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I might like it, but it doesn't feel like my record anymore. So it's like, are you going to then start deleting everything you've ever done? I think it's more like, for me, I think it's more of a internal like mental acknowledgement of the fact that like these records don't necessarily summarize who I am anymore, and they aren't like really connected to me in like a very personal way anymore. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they should be taken down, and it also doesn't necessarily mean that like that somebody who finds it as a new thing won't love it and also won't be able to necessarily get into everything else I'm doing now. Like they might be able to see more of a general idea of who I am in it and then connect to me as an artist more generally than I'm able to when I listen to it.
Yeah.
You know, like when I listen to it, I just really hear that time period because I'm me. So like whatever the element of me is like so part of everything that I've worked on and part of my everyday life that all I'm hearing is like that specific record at that specific time, whereas somebody else doesn't know me and isn't me. And so they might actually be able to see a more general perception of who I am from whatever record they get into. And that might help them get into all my discography. So, I mean, from my perspective and for my life, I think it's probably a good idea not to be deleting every old record constantly. But, you know, if you have a really good, for somebody else, you know, there might be a really good plan that involves making it all seem completely fresh and new and putting up something and taking everything else down. Right. And if that works for you, then you should do it.
It's cool though, because it's you're basically saying, without saying it, it's like a time capsule for you.
Yeah, it's kind of a time capsule. Yeah. But it's also like a time capsule that like I don't even like listen to really. It's like, I mean, it's a time capsule for someone else. I've definitely like taken, you know, like Fela Kuti always said that he like every song once they recorded it was dead. And I've heard Mick Jagger say that he never listens to his old records. I've heard Bob Dylan say that he never listens to his old records. In fact, like Bob Dylan, like everyone always complains about how he plays the song so differently all the time when you go see him. But like I've had people who like know him or have worked with him and stuff say that like it's like the thing for him is he hasn't heard, like you listened to like a Rolling Stone like on the way to the show and you were like, man, I can't wait till he plays this song. So you have the idea of how that 1968 or whatever, it's probably earlier, 66 or something, like recording sounds, and you're like waiting for it. He's up there and he's playing it and he hasn't heard that recording since he recorded it in the studio the day he recorded it. So he doesn't even know how it sounds, which like is an extreme version of what I'm talking about. I don't know if I'll ever be that extreme, but I'm learning that it's like, you really do have to just kind of divorce yourself from the older records. You can like figure out how to play them live as well as you can and tour them and maybe even incorporate some of the old stuff into the set in order to like, you know, satisfy the audience to some degree. But it isn't really something for me to like look back at or think about too much, I don't think, because I think I just need to keep doing other stuff. I think it starts to get kind of unhealthy and a little bit uncomfortable to like continue to look at old stuff and expect to see some sort of like recognition of yourself in it. It's like kind of like it's just so old and so weird. It's just kind of like messes with your head.
Right. So are you not nervous for your? Are you not going to be comparing like what's the name of your new project you're about to release? June 10th.
The new album is just called self-titled. It's just Michael Rault. And yeah, just Michael Rault.
Michael Rault. Are you? So you're not going to be comparing Michael Rault to what? And what's the name of your 2018 project?
It's a New Day Tonight.
It's a New Day Tonight. Are you not going to be comparing those two projects? And like, are you not nervous about the reception of this one compared to the last one?
I mean, you can get nervous about it sometimes. I'm not going to compare them. They're very different records. Every once in a while, I occasionally listen to something, and I mean, it's like you might listen to something that's older and be like, oh, you know what? Actually, that one element of what we were doing then that we didn't do on the new thing was like that was a cool thing that maybe we should explore a bit more, like on a future thing. But you know, I mean, I don't know. It's just impossible to assess these things. I think it's just kind of like, I think ultimately you just kind of have to accept that everything is just kind of its own thing and just kind of let it be that. And and keep making new stuff. I think the key thing for like not losing your mind as an artist is making new stuff, because that's like actually like exciting and fun and in the moment, and kind of puts you in touch with like this who you are now and what's going on in your life right now. And old stuff is always just kind of like, sometimes it can be enjoyable if you're in the exact right headspace to look back at it and hear it just as being like, wow, it's kind of cool that was like, I would never do that now. And like also like the people who were involved at that time, like I maybe am not as close with or whatever. It's like all these things about it that like are make it uniquely that moment and couldn't be done any other moment. That can be really cool in a way, but at the same time, it can also, if you listen to it with the wrong headspace, it can just kind of feel weird being
Yeah.
like that's supposed to be me. Like, you know, it's just like looking at old photos too. You know, I think people have similar reactions sometimes to being like, whoa, look at how I used to look back then. Like, oh, look at that kind of shirt I used to wear or whatever. It's like, just like, you know, or like, oh, I used to wear my hair like that, or I was used to be so skinny, whatever. I don't know. People like just like has all this emotion attached to it of comparing yourself to an older version of yourself that it makes it so that I think most artists come to be sort of unable to enjoy their own records
Mhm.
as much as other people do. I think that's pretty common in people I've talked to, and also a lot of my idols, like, you know, majorly famous, talented people. When I read their take on listening to their own stuff, I've seen it as a common thread that it's like you have to accept the fact that you really live inside a piece of work for the entire time you're making it, and eventually, when it's done, I think you kind of have to let it go and maybe not listen to it very often. Maybe
Yeah.
every once in a while if you're really curious and you want to know what was going on with that record again. But I think that it's unhealthy to continually look back at it too much, because it really is just too much of you in it. And it's just a weird reflection of an old version of you that will just drive you crazy, in my
Yeah.
experience.
That would be yeah, I feel like that would kind of be weird if you had like your own music in your playlist. That'd be kind of
I mean, they make you do that sometimes for the record labels because they want you to like make a playlist of stuff, and then like for like some like it's like such and such magazine wants to make a playlist, but they want you to include your song on it. And it's funny because you'll like find the playlist on your computer sometime and be like, hey, this is a good playlist, and put it on, and then your song comes on in the middle of it, and
you're
I'm
like
always like,
cringing.
oh, like just like I'm like running over the computer to switch it to the next one. Like I don't need to hear that. I liked all the other stuff and put on this playlist.
Shit. So, what are your goals as an artist? Like, do you want to be touring when you're 70, like 70s, like the Zambian band, or how do you
I
feel?
don't know that that's true. I don't know. I mean, I think my goals are more general than that. I suppose. I think my goals as an artist are to make, you know, better and better stuff, to find my own voice and style clearer and clearer, and to be able to explore and experiment with things that I'm interested in
Mhm.
when I want to explore and experiment with them. And I guess that's like, I guess, the very personal side of it. From a more business side, I suppose I would like to grow as large of an audience as I can and have as much, you know, largely because not really because I like desire fame or money, but I do just want to have as much sort of like stability and ability to like keep making music and keep living a reasonable life, and so that requires a certain amount of success. And so like that's kind of generally what I'm hoping for, is like an ability to not compromise the things that I want to work on and compromise like my vision, and an ability to keep doing what I want to do and live a reasonably decent lifestyle. So that kind of requires me to succeed in music. So that's how it all kind of comes together for me.
Yeah.
That could be like, you know, how that takes form. I don't really know exactly how that will take form in like, you know, in 1 year from now, let alone 40 years from now when I'm in my 70s. But I'll be like, you know, I just kind of have to like, I
So,
just try to make the decisions and do the things that allow me to like keep those core goals of what I want to do with music going in a good way as much as possible.
yeah.
Because I feel like, you know, I mean, this day and age, like the music industry is crazy. Very few people know what direction it's going in. And like, I could see touring being a thing. If touring is a thing where it's like what's making me money and what's spreading the word about the project and what's allowing me to like take some time off occasionally to get into a studio and make a record that I really enjoy, or you know, take some time off and spend some time with some people that I really care about or something, then touring could potentially be a big part of my life into my, you know, into my golden years. But on the other hand, I could also, if studio work or if something else is the thing that kind of facilitates that, then I suppose I might go more in that direction.
Yeah. Maybe in your 70s, someone will find you in Joshua Tree and make a documentary about reuniting you.
We talked about this. Me and some of the other guys in the Witch Project were talking about what it must feel like from Jaggery's perspective once when he wasn't with us, and I was like, I mean, it would be awesome if you think about it. If you think about being like an older musician and a bunch of young kids who are cool, who are like good musicians, who can actually make your band work
Yeah.
in a cool way, in a modern sense, are like find you and tell you how much they loved your old records and how much they want, like, and then basically do all, like, just organize it all, find a booking agent, put the band together, do everything, and just bring you out. I was like, that would be awesome. If I was 70 and a bunch of kids found me like that and just were like, you don't even have to worry about it. We're just going to make it sound like the records you made in like 2015, 16, 17, 18 or whatever. And then we're going to back you up. And all you have to do is come out and like play some guitar solos and sing. I'd be like, hell yeah, that sounds like super easy. That's way easier than putting it all together by yourself. So that it does seem like it's almost like a nice way to, it's a nice way to operate when you get to a certain age, if you can swing it, if you can get a bunch of young guys to do a bunch of the logistical stuff to just make it so you can come out and do your thing and play a bunch of your classic tunes. That could be fun.
Yeah, someone's gonna find A New Day Tonight in a futuristic record store, and they're gonna be like, oh, we need to find this Michael Rault guy.
Yeah, who knows what everything will be like at that point in time. That's an interesting concept to ponder. What would a futuristic record store be like? Will there be records there? Will there be CDs? Will there be any sort of physical store selling anything? But yeah, somehow in that futuristic world, if somebody found me and wanted me to do a reunion tour with them, I'd be open to it.
Yeah, this is pretty general, but I wonder what if an artist makes better music before they make money or after they're pretty solidified and have the money to make music.
I mean, I can't speak to that from experience because I've never made enough money to potentially ruin my artistic drive. But if I had to guess, I would think, they say like I've at least heard it said that studies on quality of life are that like below a certain threshold of income, your quality of life is affected to its detriment by your lack of money.
Mm-hmm.
And then above that level, it gets better for a while, but then it hits a certain place where you're too rich and it can actually start to like be detrimental to your sanity and your and I don't know, your state of happiness to some degree. At least that's what I've heard. Although it is hard to imagine how it would be so bad to have an insane amount of money and be one of those billionaires running around. I guess unless you have a conscience, then you might actually feel bad about it. But if you don't, it sounds like it'd probably be pretty fun. Yeah. But I would imagine though that there's probably a sweet spot where it's like obviously it isn't helpful for you as a musician to be so broke that you can't find the time to make music. Because if you're broke, you have to figure out other ways to make money, and if you have to figure out other ways to make money, you might find yourself not able to make music to the level and degree and put the amount of time into it that you want. So I think that at a certain place, when the money gets to a place where you can actually sustain and focus on the projects you want to focus on without having to worry about extra things on top of that to make ends meet in a financial sense, it's probably for the best and probably helps facilitate better work. At a certain level, if you're starting to make way too much money, and especially in this day and age where it's like, if you get to a certain level of celebrity, it's like there's more money in you doing like a Doritos commercial or something than there is in like making a new record. And I think that probably starts to hurt your artistic drive to some degree when you start to realize that you're like, I mean, maybe I could like host the, Super Bowl halftime show or something. I mean, I'm not talking about playing it as an artist. I just mean like, you get to start to like host like some weird celebrity singing show or something. And then that would probably be way more money than like making a new record. And then I have to imagine that at that point you transfer to a place where you're not like, thinking as hard about your next artistic goal, because you might have kind of switched over to being like, I can live a hell of a lot easier life without making any art. Why would I even bother? Obviously from my perspective, I would say you should bother because you should just make cool stuff. And I think it's important to your life to make cool art. But obviously some people switch over to not caring about it as much anymore, it seems.
Yeah. What I think is cool is comedians, like no matter how big you are, like if you can't relate, if the audience can't relate to what you're talking about, you're not going to have a good set, So like even the biggest comedians have to perform at comedy clubs or even smaller venues and certain comedy clubs, so that they and live life so that when they actually perform like an hour special or whatever it is, that the audience can actually connect with them.
Right. Yeah. It's like that Jerry Seinfeld quote where he said that he's like, the audience doesn't laugh at a reputation, or like a reputation's nothing to laugh at or something like that. But I just think it is true that you get a big round of applause for just being there because they like you, but then you have to actually deliver. Otherwise, it's not going to be good. I guess
Yeah.
it's the most intense for comedians. It's kind of the same for bands too, but only like bands that have a live-ish element. If you're just playing with backing tracks and stuff, which I'm not saying like I don't have a moral issue with that, but if you are, there's less of a chance of it bombing. It's more like this song is going to basically sound like it sounds, and people love the song, so it's going to be good. Whereas as a live band, there's a little bit more potential possibility of things totally going off the rails or things being totally crazy. And if you're not playing well, the band audience might be sitting there being like, you know what, I like this band, but they sound like shit tonight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's sort of more or less, it is sort of similar in that regard, being a live band to being a comedian. But yeah, comedians have it worse.
Well, I would say I don't know. This might be a hot take to say I have a problem with backing tracks, but I think I I really care about live performances lately. Like yesterday, Denzel Curry came to town, and actually, let's say probably the last 3 or 4 concerts I've gone to, I've left. Also because I'm in press, I get like free tickets to stuff. So maybe if I paid, it would be a different thing. But
Right.
like
Yeah.
I've like the past 3 or 4 concerts I've gone to, I've literally just left in the middle of the show, even for like some bigger artists, because I'm like, this isn't really a performance. There's either backing tracks or you're not even really performing. You're just like dancing or whatever for hip hop bass. Like even but some bands even like there was a few band shows I've gone to that I've left because I'm really big into performances lately, and like the time and dedication that goes into that. Like even like for a hip hop show, like some artists will come to town and they won't have a DJ, and they're like just playing the next song and then performing it. Like that's not, you didn't take an extra step to get a DJ or whatever. Or for some hip hop shows, the DJ just goes "Bow, bow, bow," and just plays some
Yeah.
shitty,
Yeah.
like, so like I think I've kind of outgrown going to hip hop shows unless there's someone that's actually taking time into
I mean,
making
there
a
needs to
cool
be something
performance.
that draws you in to some degree or makes it seem special. I mean, I
Yeah.
saw one of the craziest shows I ever saw was Yellow Man and Josie Wales doing like a dance hall set in like a church basement in Montreal for Pop Montreal, and they were backed up by like one of the biggest. I didn't know who he was, but he must have been one of the like premier dance hall DJs in Montreal. So he had all the records, all the instrumental records,
Yeah.
and they were doing all the like live DJing stuff with the records, and they were putting on a show. And that show was awesome. I mean, there was no live music besides just the actual, the actual singing or rapping or whatever you want to call it, the toasting. But there was also like, but there was just something that was really interactive. Obviously, they're like calling out to like rewind the song to the top randomly and stuff, and then going right to the top, and they're like all these different things that made it like cool. I don't know what the magic factor is, but I know what you mean. There's got to be something that makes it feel like there's something special happening right now.
Yeah.
So I don't really want to just watch like, it's like ultimately if you're just going to play your backing track, or even if a band is just playing like really by rote, and you're just going to then go through the motions, it's like I might as well go home and listen to your record because it's probably a cooler performance than your like uninspired version of this.
Because people can tell, and people are paying money to go to these things. Like
Yeah, totally.
I just saw Alt J. It was fucking crazy. Portugal the Man opened for Alt J.
Right. I
That
saw some photos of the show that they did in LA, I think. Yeah.
I just saw them in LA. I mean, not in LA. You just said LA. I just saw them in
Right. Yeah,
Seattle.
sorry. Yeah.
And that shit was awesome. Like the visuals and everything were super cool. But it's also because it's a live element with actually playing instruments. I just feel like when it's a hip hop show, there's a lot to be desired. Also, I think it's kind of a given. A lot of hip hop shows kind of are just not the best.
I mean, hip hop is like also just like a studio. It's like at its heart and in its most true form, it's kind of a studio art, which is tough. I mean, it's like in a way, it's like, similarly, and in a world that I know a little bit more about, but it's like the Beatles didn't play live shows when they were making their like most sound collagey, tripped out production freak out records, like when they were doing like I Am the Walrus and Strawberry Fields and stuff like that. They never played those songs live. And if they did, it could have been kind of cool maybe to see it done in like a more straightforward band way, but you would have lost so much of what was happening on the record.
Yeah.
I suppose they could have done what a lot of hip hop artists do and just go out and play live and play the backing tracks behind them. But that also would have been kind of like, well, it's like, it's a little tough. It's like, I mean, I think there's so much, some styles of music I feel like some styles of music I think are played live mostly because it's a financial gain to tour. Like touring is like, can you make a lot of money off touring? So it's like, well, we got to figure out a way to do this stuff live. But the music is made largely, and its main inspiration is largely just as a studio experiment that was never really meant to be played live. Some forms of music are a little bit more geared towards being played live.
Yeah.
That can be maybe a little bit more fun to see live. But, there's also there's 1,000 different ways to skin a cat or whatever. So there's ways to make it work in every way, but it does take some creativity sometimes to make a live show that actually connects.
100%. Well, man, I'm excited for your new project. I checked out your song today, Either Love or Money. Did I get it right? I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, Neither Love, No Money. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Is it neither or neither? I say neither.
I say neither.
Because you're Canadian?
But the funny thing is that I think that it's like depends on the situation. And I'm trying to think about if I even say neither or neither in the song. But when I say the title, I always say neither, but I'm not sure. There's no rule to this. Either way works.
Yeah. Well, from that track, I'm excited for your self-titled album to come out June 10th. And you got to come to Seattle. I think I'm coming to LA soon too. But I'd love to see you in Seattle sometime.
Right on. I think we have a show. I think we announced a show today where I think we're gonna be playing in Seattle with. I'm not actually gonna be in Witch. I'm gonna be opening for Witch, with my band in Seattle. I don't remember the date exactly, but it's in June. So that'll be something to look forward to.
Hell yeah! There we go. Well, I end the podcast by asking if you have any final words or advice for up and coming artists, creators, influencers, and anything you'd like to say to the world.
I wish I had something better, but I'll just stick with it. I guess if you're doing it for genuine reasons and you really feel passionate need to do it and an honest sense that you're doing something that's worthwhile to you at least, and hopefully to other people, then I think that in my experience, I think that good things will come of that. And so if that's what you're doing, then keep on doing it.
Yes, sir. Stick with it, guys. And what is the easiest way for people to reach you?
Probably, I got Instagram, I got Twitter, I got Facebook. So those three. It's probably an email somewhere kicking around that if you really want to track it down, you can probably email me too. But any of those. And
it's Michael with an EA or an AE?
AE. MICHAEL. RAULT. That's how I spell my name.
Hell yeah. What is the most popular version? Is it AE or EA first? Like which?
AE is the traditionally right one, I think. But some people are named Michael with an EA. It's basically a typo that's become a name. But,
There we go. Well, this has been the NAST podcast with
Michael Rault.